The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the endless Utah desert, painting the rugged wilderness in hues of gold and burnt orange. The rhythmic chug of the locomotive echoed across the vast, barren landscape as the iron beast thundered along the winding rails, slicing through the silence with steely resolve. This was no ordinary freight. The Union Pacific Limited carried more than passengers today. Hidden in its steel belly was cargo worth a king's ransom. But trouble was brewing. High atop the jagged cliffs, overlooking the narrow canyon through which the train coursed, a dark shape crouched low, silhouetted against the blazing sky. The Desert Devil Gang had been tracking this shipment for weeks, and now the moment had arrived. "All right, boys," growled their leader, a hard-eyed man known only as Kane Desert Devil Morgan. His nickname came from the cruel desert winds he seemed to command and the merciless reputation that preceded him. His voice was low but carried an edge that made every man listen. "Take your positions. We hit that train fast and hard." With practiced precision, the gang moved. 2 men climbed down the rocky face with ropes, swaying dangerously above the rushing canyon floor below. Others readied rifles, pistols, and dynamite, the air thick with the scent of gun oil and dust. The train was closing fast. Below, the iron horse steamed forward, whistle wailing, wheels clanking in relentless rhythm. Inside the engine cab, Thomas Dank, the train conductor, sat alert, eyes scanning the horizon with a practiced calm that belied the storm gathering ahead. Suddenly, the first shots rang out, sharp cracks slicing through the desert air. Bullets slammed into the wooden sides of the caboose and shattered the windows of the rear passenger car. Screams echoed as frightened travelers ducked low, clutching children and each other. "Hold steady," Thomas barked into the radio. "Notify the engineer. We're under attack." The Desert Devils wasted no time. From the cliffs, they leapt, grappling hooks and ropes finding purchase on the moving train's metal frame. One by one, grim-faced bandits swung aboard like shadows, landing hard on the roof and scrambling down the sides, weapons drawn. Thomas's heart hammered as he watched the battle unfold from the cab. His crew fought back fiercely, rifles blazing through open windows, while passengers scrambled for cover amid the chaos. The gang was relentless, their faces set in grim determination. Desert Devil Morgan himself landed near the coal car, his eyes scanning the train like a hawk. "Secure the cargo," he snarled. "No one gets in our way." Smoke and dust swirled, mixing with the acrid scent of gunpowder. A bandit detonated a small charge near the supply car, the explosion shaking the train, throwing sparks into the dry air. Thomas gritted his teeth, palms sweating as he wrestled the radio handset. "Hold the line. Reinforcements are hours out. We make it to Cedar Springs, or we don't make it at all." The fight was fierce and desperate. Passengers peered out from shattered windows, faces pale with terror. Outside, the Desert Devils clawed their way through the cars, tearing through doors and battling the crew. Thomas moved through the narrow corridors, rallying his men, using every ounce of courage and wit to stay one step ahead of the ruthless gang. The train barreled forward into the heart of the Utah wilderness, the unforgiving desert landscape stretching endlessly on either side. The Desert Devil Gang had started this battle, but Thomas Dank was determined it would be their last. Thomas Dank had the kind of calm that came from years of experience and a deep understanding of the wild land he called home. At 42, he was tall and lean, with a weathered face etched by the relentless Utah sun and sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. His dark hair, streaked with silver at the temples, was usually tucked beneath his battered conductor's hat, a symbol of the many miles he had traveled across this unforgiving terrain. Every day, behind the controls of the Union Pacific Limited, Thomas felt a mixture of pride and responsibility. This was more than a train to him. It was a lifeline for the scattered towns and ranches tucked among the vast canyons and plateaus of Utah's wilderness. The landscape here was breathtaking yet brutal. Towering sandstone cliffs rose like ancient sentinels, their red and ochre faces carved by centuries of wind and water. Below, the desert stretched endlessly, dotted with resilient sagebrush, prickly cacti, and the occasional solitary pine that clung stubbornly to the rocky soil. The railroad snaked through this rugged terrain, bridging vast distances and connecting remote communities that depended on the train for supplies, mail, and news from the outside world. Thomas had driven this route countless times. He knew every twist and turn, every precarious trestle and tunnel that sliced through the cliffs. The wilderness wasn't just scenery, it was a constant threat. Flash floods could wash out tracks without warning. Rock slides could trap a train in the middle of nowhere for days. The desert heat was merciless, and winter storms could blanket the tracks in ice and snow. For Thomas, the key to survival was vigilance, skill, and a steady nerve. Today, the Union Pacific Limited was carrying more than just passengers and goods. Hidden beneath locked crates was a shipment of silver bullion destined for the banks of Salt Lake City, the kind of treasure that could turn a desperate man into a dangerous one. Thomas had heard whispers, rumors that the Desert Devil Gang was moving through the region. A ruthless band of outlaws led by Kane Desert Devil Morgan, a man whose name was spoken in fear and anger alike. They were infamous for their brutal raids and their ability to strike quickly and vanish like ghosts in the desert. Despite the danger, Thomas remained unshaken. He was no stranger to threats. Over the years, he had faced down storms, mechanical failures, and even hostile passengers. But none of those challenges compared to a determined gang of outlaws aiming to seize the train and everything aboard it. The conductor's cabin was his domain. Surrounded by levers, gauges, and the steady hiss of steam, Thomas felt the pulse of the engine beneath his hands. He was part of the machine and part of the wilderness it carved through. His crew trusted him because he was calm under pressure, a man who could make split-second decisions when lives hung in the balance. As the train rumbled deeper into the canyon, Thomas scanned the cliffs with a practiced eye. He knew the desert devils were out there, somewhere on those ridges or hidden in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The wind whispered through the rocks, carrying a dry heat that promised a long, harsh day ahead. Thomas's thoughts drifted briefly to the passengers. Families headed west for new beginnings, miners hoping to strike it rich, merchants carrying their livelihoods in crates and sacks. They depended on him to keep them safe, to navigate the train through danger and deliver them to their destination. His grip tightened on the throttle, the knuckles whitening. This was more than a job. It was a promise. Thomas Dank was ready for whatever the desert and the Desert Devil Gang might throw at him. Because in this vast, wild wilderness of Utah, the train wasn't just a vehicle. It was a fortress, and Thomas was its guardian. The Union Pacific Limited thundered through the harsh Utah wilderness like a silver arrow cutting a path across a vast, untamed frontier. For many aboard, this was more than just a journey. It was a fragile thread of hope stretched across the arid landscape, linking isolated towns and families to the promise of safety, commerce, and a future beyond the desert. But now that thread was perilously thin. The Desert Devil Gang, infamous for their ruthless raids and unyielding violence, was closing in fast. Their plan to hijack the train wasn't just about stealing gold or goods. It was an attack on everything the Union Pacific represented. Lives, livelihoods, and the very survival of communities depended on the train's safe passage. Inside the passenger cars, anxiety simmered beneath polite conversation and forced smiles. Mothers clutched children close, their eyes darting nervously toward shattered windows and locked doors. A miner in worn boots whispered prayers under his breath, gripping the armrest as if it were a lifeline. An elderly couple sat hand in hand, their faces etched with years of hardship, hoping to reunite with distant family in Salt Lake City. Every person on the train was a story, and every story was at risk. Thomas Dank, the train's seasoned conductor, understood this all too well. His role wasn't merely to steer an engine through desert canyons. It was to protect these lives, to be a steady hand in the face of chaos. To Thomas, the Union Pacific Limited was a moving sanctuary, a fragile bastion of order amid the wild unpredictability of the wilderness. But the danger was very real. The Desert Devil Gang's reputation was well-earned. Led by Kane Desert Devil Morgan, they were known for brutal efficiency and merciless tactics. Their raids left towns devastated and families shattered. When the Desert Devils came calling, it meant violence and loss. Today, they weren't just after passengers or valuables. They were after control. The train itself was the prize. Beneath locked steel doors, the cargo car held a shipment of silver bullion, a fortune in precious metal that would bolster the struggling economies of remote towns and fund critical infrastructure projects. For merchants, miners, and townsfolk awaiting its arrival, the cargo was a lifeline. For the Desert Devils, it was power, the key to expanding their influence and fueling further violence. If the gang succeeded in seizing the bullion, it would not only mean financial ruin for the towns relying on the shipment, but a surge in outlaw activity that could plunge the region into chaos. The stakes were stark. Cedar Springs, the next stop along the route, was a small but vital community. Its survival hinged on the train's timely arrival. Supplies of food, medicine, and equipment depended on the Union Pacific Limited. If the Desert Devils delayed or destroyed the train, Cedar Springs could face starvation and collapse. The ripple effect would be devastating, cutting off trade routes and leaving settlements isolated. Moreover, the very rails themselves were a symbol of progress and order in the Wild West. Every successful journey reinforced the promise of law and civilization in a landscape often ruled by violence and uncertainty. A hijacked train was more than a crime. It was a challenge to that fragile order. Thomas felt the crushing weight of this responsibility in every moment. He knew that the lives of hundreds rested on his shoulders. Passengers, crew, and the countless people in towns beyond the horizon. He wasn't just a conductor. He was a guardian. Inside the train's cars, tension mounted. Crew members prepared for the worst, checking weapons, sealing compartments, and briefing passengers on emergency procedures. They understood that the Desert Devil Gang's approach meant a violent confrontation. Some were seasoned veterans. Others were men who had never faced a gunfight. But all were united by a shared determination to protect the train at any cost. The threat wasn't only external. Sabotage was a real danger. The Desert Devils had been known to disable brakes, tamper with communication lines, and rig explosives. Any such attack could derail the train, turning it into a deadly trap in the middle of the wilderness. Thomas's mind raced as he considered every possibility. If the gang gained control of the engine, they could divert the train to a remote location, isolate the passengers, and carry out a more thorough robbery. If the silver bullion was lost, the economic consequences could ripple across the region for months, even years. He thought of the faces in the passenger cars, children clutching stuffed animals, miners dreaming of home, families holding on to hope. Each was a life he had sworn to protect. The Desert Devil Gang's threat was not just to property, but to human dignity and survival. The harsh Utah landscape provided no easy escape or refuge. The desert could be merciless, scorching heat by day, freezing cold by night, and endless miles of barren rock and sand. Stranded in the wilderness, without supplies or shelter, even the strongest could falter. For the passengers and crew, the train was their only hope of safety. Failure was unthinkable. Thomas adjusted his hat, feeling the coarse fabric against his forehead. His hands, steady despite the pressure, gripped the controls with renewed resolve. The rhythmic clatter of the wheels against the rails was a heartbeat, a constant reminder that every second counted. As the sun climbed higher, burning away the morning chill, the Desert Devil Gang's plans were already in motion. The tension coiled tighter with every mile. The train's survival, and the lives it carried, would soon be tested in ways no one aboard could yet imagine. The desert sun blazed high above the rugged cliffs of Utah, casting long, stark shadows across the rocky outcrops where Kane Desert Devil Morgan and his gang gathered. The air was thick with dust and tension, the silence broken only by the distant rumble of the Union Pacific Limited forging its way through the canyon below. Kane stood at the edge of the cliff, eyes narrowed against the glare, watching the train's progress. His face was a map of hard lines and scars, each telling a story of battles fought and won. The gang's name, the Desert Devils, had become synonymous with fear across the region. Their signature hit, the hijacking of trains loaded with gold and supplies, had brought entire towns to their knees. But this time, Kane planned something different. "We don't just steal," Kane said, voice low and deliberate. "We take control." His gang circled around, listening intently. This wasn't just another robbery. It was a bold, dangerous gambit to seize the train itself and hold it hostage. The silver bullion aboard was only part of the prize. Controlling the train meant control over the lifelines running through the wilderness, the very veins of commerce and communication. Behind Kane stood Lila, sharp shot. Hayes, the gang's expert marksman. Lila was as lethal as she was cold. Her steady hand had felled more than one pursuer from impossible distances. She checked her rifle carefully, her eyes scanning the horizon for the first sign of the train. "Once we're aboard," Kane continued, "we split into teams. Lila, you take the rear and secure the passengers. No one gets out without our say. Jensen and his boys will hit the cargo cars, take the silver and the supplies. The rest of you, including me, will move to the engine. We stop this train from moving another inch." Jensen, a hulking brute with a jagged scar running down his left cheek, cracked his knuckles in anticipation. "They won't know what hit him," he said, voice low and rough. The Desert Devils were a mix of hardened criminals, each with their own dark past and skills honed by years of outlaw living. Besides Kane, Lila, and Jensen, there was Quick Draw McGraw, a young but deadly fast pistol shooter, and Grim Silas, the gang's explosives expert, known for his uncanny ability to rig traps and cause chaos in moments. Their plan was audacious. Hijack the train while it was moving through the narrow canyon where escape routes were limited. Using ropes and grappling hooks, they would board the cars from the cliffs above, swiftly overpower the crew and passengers, and seize control of the engine. Once the train was stopped, they would hold everyone hostage until their demands were met, or until they had stripped the cargo of its treasure. But Kane was clear-eyed about the risks. The train's conductor, Thomas Dank, was rumored to be a man not easily intimidated. Stories of his courage and quick thinking had reached even the Desert Devil's ears. Kane knew this wouldn't be an easy score. "Thomas Dank's got a reputation," Kane said, pacing the rocky ledge. "We'll need to be sharp. No mistakes." The gang prepared silently, packing weapons, checking ammunition, and double-checking their ropes and climbing gear. The tension was palpable, a mix of excitement, fear, and deadly determination. This was a fight not just for money, but for survival and dominance. As the train's whistle echoed through the canyon below, the gang took their positions. Lila settled into a concealed spot overlooking the rear cars, sniper rifle ready. Jensen and his crew positioned themselves near the middle cars, ready to strike. Kane and the others prepared for the engine assault. "Remember," Kane warned, voice low but firm, "this is more than a robbery. It's a statement. The Desert Devils run these lands now, and anyone who stands in our way will pay." The first shots would soon ring out. Far below, the train surged forward, unaware of the storm about to break upon it. Inside the cab, Thomas Dank tightened his grip on the throttle, senses sharp. The desert held many dangers, but none as deadly as the men lurking on the cliffs above. As Kane gave a signal, ropes flew through the air, hooks catching the metal rails. One by one, the Desert Devils descended onto the moving train like ghosts in the night. The battle for the Union Pacific Limited was about to begin. The moment the Desert Devils clambered aboard the speeding Union Pacific Limited, the air erupted into chaos. The once peaceful rhythm of the train's journey shattered by the sharp reports of gunfire and shouted commands. Thomas Dank moved like a man possessed, every muscle taut, Every nerve alert, he sprang into action, rallying his crew and passengers alike. He knew that the gang's surprise attack was only the beginning. The real fight was about to unfold, car by car, inch by desperate inch. From the rear, Lila, sharp shot, Hayes crouched behind the battered passenger car's metal frame, her rifle steady and eyes narrowed. One precise shot rang out, catching a crew member who had emerged to challenge the bandits. The man crumpled silently, sending a ripple of fear through the passengers. "Hold your fire," Thomas yelled, moving through the narrow corridors, his voice firm but calm. "We protect the people. No needless risk." But the Desert Devils showed no mercy. Jensen's crew blasted open the cargo car doors with crowbars and dynamite, setting off a cloud of dust and sparks. The valuable silver bullion glinted coldly beneath the flickering lantern light inside the freight hold. The gang began loading the heavy crates onto waiting horses tied near the tracks, but time was against them. "Grim, how's the sabotage coming?" Kane called out, his eyes burning with fierce focus. Grim Silas, crouched beneath the engine, was already at work. Sparks flew as he rigged the brakes with explosives, intent on bringing the train to a screeching halt once the hijack was complete. His fingers worked quickly, a fuse lit with a flick of his match. Suddenly, the train lurched violently as the brakes began to respond erratically, grinding and screeching against the wheels. Thomas felt the warning immediately and barked orders to his engineers. "Check the brake lines. Don't let them stop us." The crew scrambled, desperately fighting to maintain control. The train was careening through the canyon at full speed, but every second counted. If the brakes failed, the train could derail, throwing passengers into mortal danger. Meanwhile, in the dimly lit corridors, firefights erupted. Thomas dodged flying debris as bullets tore through walls and shattered glass. Passengers screamed, some scrambling for cover, others frozen in terror. One passenger, a young miner named Samuel, found himself trapped between two hostile factions in a narrow aisle. With quick thinking, he ducked behind an overturned table and whispered a prayer as bullets splintered wood beside him. Above, Quick Draw McGraw moved like a shadow, pistol blazing. His reputation as one of the fastest shooters in the West was well-earned. He engaged Thomas's deputy, Cal Evans, in a brutal gunfight that spilled onto the roof of the passenger car. The two men circled each other, trading shots and narrow misses, their silhouettes stark against the fiery desert sky. Back in the engine room, Thomas confronted Kane face-to-face amid the hissing steam and roaring machinery. Kane's cruel grin spread as he raised his pistol. "You're brave, Conductor," Kane sneered. "But this train belongs to us now." Thomas's jaw tightened. "Not while I'm breathing." Suddenly, a loud explosion rocked the train. Grim sabotage had triggered prematurely. The engine lurched violently, threatening to derail. The crew worked frantically to stabilize the locomotive, while Thomas grabbed a wrench, ready to fight both man and machine. In the passenger cars, chaos reigned. Mothers shielded their children as bandits stormed through, searching for valuables and controlling the terrified crowd. Thomas's crew fought to maintain order, their weapons a shield against the growing threat. Desperate to turn the tide, Thomas made a bold decision. He grabbed a lantern and climbed to the roof, racing toward the rear where Lila was pinning down the passengers. "Lila!" he shouted over the din. She glanced up, eyes flickering with surprise and respect. "We need to take back control," Thomas yelled. "Now!" Together, they coordinated a counterattack. Thomas's crew surged forward, using surprise and determination to push the gang back car by car. Shots rang out, fists flew, and the struggle waged on the roof and inside the train. The train speed fluctuated wildly as the brakes faltered and the sabotage took its toll. Every second was a battle against both the outlaws and the deadly wilderness. Amid the gunfire and explosions, narrow escapes became moments of luck and courage. A passenger narrowly avoided falling from the roof when a plank cracked beneath him. Jensen, caught off guard by a sudden burst of rifle fire, barely dodged a bullet that tore through his jacket. Thomas, bloodied but unbroken, fought with the fierce determination of a man defending not just a train, but the hopes and lives of everyone aboard. As the sun dipped low behind the cliffs, casting the canyon into shadow, the battle showed no sign of abating. The Desert Devils were relentless, but so was Thomas Dank. The fight for the Union Pacific Limited had turned into a desperate war, one where every shot, every move, could mean the difference between survival and disaster. The desert night descended swiftly over the Utah Canyon, swallowing the battered Union Pacific Limited in shadow. The once steady rhythm of the train was now an erratic, desperate beat, a battle drum for the war raging within its steel walls. The fight between Thomas Dank and Kane, Desert Devil, Morgan's ruthless gang, had reached its boiling point. Inside the engine cab, sweat dripped down Thomas's forehead as his eyes locked onto the twisted forms of the Desert Devils blocking the controls. Kane stood tall and confident, a pistol in one hand and a cruel grin plastered across his scarred face. Behind him, his men fanned out, securing their hold over the train. But Thomas was far from defeated. "Your reign ends here, Kane," Thomas growled, voice low and steady, every word laced with unyielding resolve. "This train and everyone on it belongs to me." Kane laughed, dark and bitter. "You're just a conductor, Thomas. You don't stand a chance." But Thomas had learned long ago that courage could level mountains, and desperation sharpen the mind like a blade. With a swift move, Thomas ducked behind the control panel, narrowly avoiding a hail of bullets. The engine room echoed with the crack of gunfire and the hiss of steam escaping from ruptured pipes. Sparks flew as the machinery groaned under the strain, threatening to explode at any moment. Suddenly, Thomas lunged for the emergency brake lever. Kane barked orders, and his men fired blindly, desperate to stop him. Thomas's fingers clenched the lever, yanking it with all his might. The train began to slow, shuddering violently as the brakes fought to overcome the sabotage Grim Silas had set earlier. Outside, the canyon echoed with the staccato rhythm of gunshots and shouted commands. On the roofs and along the corridors, Thomas's crew and the remaining passengers fought fiercely, pushing back against the Desert Devils inch by bloody inch. At the rear, Lila sharp shot. Hayes found herself pinned behind a shattered window, her rifle smoke curling upward. When a flash of movement caught her eye, she swung the barrel around and fired, a sharp crack splitting the night air. One of Kane's men fell, his body collapsing onto the desert floor far below. But Kane was relentless. He pressed forward, barking orders for a final assault on the engine cab. "Take him down," he roared. Thomas's heart hammered, but his mind raced faster. He grabbed a coil of heavy rope and, with the engine slowed to a crawl, prepared to make his move. As Kane and his men burst into the cab, Thomas sprang into action, yanking the rope taut and whipping it with deadly precision. The rope lashed out, striking the nearest bandit and sending him sprawling. A vicious melee erupted, fists and guns clashing in the cramped space. The noise was deafening. Metal clanged, bodies collided, and the hiss of steam punctuated the chaos. Thomas fought with a ferocity born of desperation, his every strike fueled by the lives depending on him. Kane and Thomas grappled, trading blows in a brutal contest of strength and will. Kane's pistol flashed, but Thomas dodged, managing to disarm the outlaw with a well-timed twist. With Kane momentarily stunned, Thomas seized the opportunity. He yanked open a maintenance hatch and crawled through a narrow passage leading to the roof. Above, the battle raged on. Quick Draw McGraw faced off against Cal Evans in a tense standoff, their pistols smoking as they exchanged deadly shots. Jensen's crew tried to regroup near the cargo cars, but Thomas could see Lila rallying the passengers, encouraging them to resist. Thomas emerged onto the roof, breath ragged but eyes blazing. He shouted, rallying his allies. "Now's the time. Push them back." With renewed vigor, Thomas and the crew launched a coordinated counterattack. They fought with everything they had: clubs, rifles, even makeshift weapons like broken tools and cargo crates. Passengers joined the fray, their fear turning to fierce determination. The desert devils, taken aback by the sudden resistance, faltered. Cain, recovering from his defeat in the cab, bellowed orders, but his men were losing ground. Thomas spotted grim Silas attempting to ignite another explosive near the front of the train. Without hesitation, Thomas charged, tackling the explosives expert to the ground. A struggle ensued, but Thomas's grit prevailed. He wrestled the fuse away and crushed it beneath his boot. The train slowed further, finally coming to a halt on a rocky outcrop overlooking the desert floor. The battle had reached its climax. Cain, battered and cornered, glared at Thomas with hatred burning in his eyes. "This isn't over, Conductor," he spat. "The desert belongs to the devil, and you." Thomas stood tall, chest heaving, bloodied but unbroken. "Not today. Not ever." The rest of the desert devils, realizing their defeat, began to scatter, some leaping into the darkness below, others retreating toward the cliffs. But Thomas's crew and a few brave passengers quickly rounded them up, securing weapons and ensuring no one escaped. As dawn broke over the canyon, the Union Pacific Limited sat battered but victorious. The passengers, shaken but alive, began to gather on the platform cars, whispering thanks to the conductor who had risked everything to save them. Thomas Dank surveyed the scene, exhaustion washing over him but tempered by a quiet pride. He had faced the Desert Devil Gang and survived. The train was safe, the cargo intact, the people unharmed. But as he looked toward the distant horizon, Thomas knew this was only one battle in a larger war. The desert was vast and danger would return. Yet for now, the Union Pacific Limited was a symbol of hope, a testament to courage, resilience, and the enduring spirit of a man who refused to let darkness prevail. The sun rose slowly over the jagged Utah horizon, casting a warm golden light across the battered but triumphant Union Pacific Limited. The air was still heavy with dust and the echoes of gunfire, but the battle had ended. The Desert Devil Gang's grip on the train was broken. Their reign of terror, at least for now, brought to a hard stop. Thomas Dank stood on the platform car, his boots steady on the worn metal floor, looking out over the quiet desert. His clothes were stained with dirt and blood, his face weary but resolute. Around him, passengers emerged cautiously from their hiding places, faces etched with relief, gratitude, and lingering fear. Families embraced, some weeping quietly, others smiling through exhaustion. Children clung to parents, wide-eyed and confused but safe. The miners, merchants, and travelers who had boarded just hours before as strangers now shared a bond forged in fire. Thomas's crew moved swiftly to secure the train, locking down weapons and helping passengers. The sheriff's deputies, alerted by telegraph from a nearby station, had arrived just in time to round up the remaining Desert Devils who hadn't fled into the wilderness. Cain Desert Devil Morgan and his closest lieutenants were shackled and led away, their brutal chapter in the Utah deserts drawing to a close. But Thomas knew this victory was temporary. Outlaws like the Desert Devils never stayed down for long. The silver bullion remained secure, its glittering promise intact. The shipment would soon reach Salt Lake City, bringing relief and hope to struggling towns that depended on its arrival. The economic lifeline had been preserved, but Thomas understood the fragile balance between law and lawlessness in these wild lands. As he walked through the train, Thomas paused to speak quietly with passengers and crew, offering words of reassurance and thanks. Many called him a hero, but Thomas shrugged off the praise. "I did what any man would do," he said simply. "We all did." Still, beneath his humble words lay a fierce pride. Pride in the resilience of the people he protected and the courage that surfaced in moments of danger. The experience had changed him, deepening his understanding of the perilous world he navigated every day. The desert was unforgiving, and threats like the Desert Devils were never far away. But so too was hope. hope carried forward by the steady wheels of the train and the unbreakable spirit of those who rode it. As the Union Pacific Limited prepared to roll again, Thomas felt the weight of responsibility settle firmly on his shoulders once more. This was no ordinary journey. It was a mission to defend civilization in a land where chaos often threatened to take hold. And while the battle had been won, the war was far from over. In the distance, the desert winds whispered of new dangers lurking beyond the horizon. Rival gangs, shifting alliances, and challenges yet unseen. Thomas knew he would face them all, because the train was more than metal and steam. It was a symbol, a promise, and a beacon for everyone striving to carve out a future in the Wild West. With a final glance toward the rising sun, Thomas climbed back into the conductor's cabin. The whistle blew, a piercing call that echoed across the canyon, signaling the train's rebirth. As the wheels began to turn once again, Thomas Dank steeled himself for whatever lay ahead. Because in the vast, relentless wilderness of Utah, a hero's work is never done.